Welcome to the Freedom to Learn podcast. I'm your host, Ginny Gentles. This season, we're diving into what it means to return education to states, communities, and families. And we're exploring what becomes possible when education is freed from union dominance and federal control. Over 1 million of Florida's K-12 students attend a public school of choice through magnet programs, open enrollment, career and technical academies, and charter and lab schools. Over 500,000 of Florida's K-12 students participate in the state's education savings account and tax credit scholarship programs. Ron Matus joins the podcast today to share the stories of the families and educators driving innovation and expanding these opportunities across the state. We explore the growth of the state's ESA programs, how students with disabilities benefit, rural school choice options, the rise of hybrid homeschools, specialized co-ops, and what Ron calls a la carte options. We also talk about the surprising growth in Catholic school enrollment, something unique to Florida. Ron Matus is Director of Research and Special Projects at Step Up for Students, a nonprofit scholarship granting organization in Florida that empowers families to customize their children's education. Ron joined Step Up in 2012 after 20 years in journalism, including 8 years as an education reporter. Ron Matus, welcome to Freedom to Learn.
Oh, Jenny, thank you so much for having me.
Well, I'm really excited for today's conversation. I'm very eager to take a step back from policy and legal debates and really just talk about the type of educational options that are being created and expanded in states like Florida with thriving education freedom environments. And so, of course, I had to talk to you. You are a master at finding educators, parents who have stories to tell in this incredibly rich environment that's been created in Florida. Let's tell some stories.
Awesome. Well, I think you give me too much credit. I mean, you can drive in any direction in Florida and you're going to stumble on all kinds of great stories. It's a story-rich environment because we have so much choice. So my job's pretty easy. I just go in any direction and I find a great story. So the Family Empowerment Scholarship, there's both the educational opportunity part of it, and then there's a unique abilities part of it. My gosh, I think between the Florida Tax Credit Scholarship and the FESEO, there's about 300,000 kids. Then for the Unique Abilities Scholarship, there's another 150,000. And then there's, of course, the new PEP Scholarship, which is an ESA for a la carte learners, which has about 80,000 at this point. I mean, you put them all together, Jenny, we have 540,000 kids on scholarship. Yeah, I shake my head all the time. Like, I can't believe this either. Like when I got to Step Up in 2012, there were about 50,000 kids on scholarship. So fast forward, a little more than a decade and it's 10 times as many.
When you're talking about the Family Empowerment Scholarship for students with unique abilities refers to students with disabilities, students with special needs. And so that was the McKay Scholarship Program, and now is this Education Savings Account program. So it's not just for tuition, right?
That's right. That's right. So McKay was the first, voucher for students with disabilities, was the biggest voucher in America, actually, for a long time, kind of peaked out at about 30,000 kids. I think it started statewide 2001. 2014, we got the ESA for students with unique abilities. And then a few years ago, those programs were merged. McKay was merged into the ESA and became an ESA too. So all the scholarships for students with special needs are an ESA. And yes, they can be used not just for tuition, but tutors, therapists, curriculum and instructional materials, all kinds of things, technology. Some of it can be saved. You can use it for college if you want. That really is a remarkably flexible program, and parents absolutely love it.
Yeah, so this is not a new idea, serving students with disabilities and ensuring that they have options outside their residentially assigned public school. This has been around, as we're saying, for decades. And then this expansion that takes it beyond tuition has been really exciting to see. Florida's great in that the funding levels for students with disabilities differs depending on the need of the child, right?
Right. Right. So the average amount is about $10,000 per kid, but it does depend on the severity of the disability. And so it's possible to get a higher matrix level.
That idea of tiered funding depending on the child's need is wonderful and makes total sense. Why should the bureaucracy of the public school district totally absorb the funds? Those families should have the funds that are tiered to the child's needs and then be able to take them to these options and add on these therapies that truly do help the child. Okay, so that's a little bit on the programs and the participation, a little on history, to a lot of options in the state, right?
Everything has grown significantly. I mean, there has just been this explosion in options. And just with the private schools alone, you can see just how diverse and dynamic things have become. The number of private schools in Florida over the past 10 years has grown by more than a third, a net gain of like 820 something private schools. And for comparison, there are 40 states that don't have 820 private
Right.
schools. We've grown more private schools in 10 years than 40 states have private schools, period. And that's just official state registered, registered with the DOE private schools. I mean, on top of that, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of other entities that are sort of kind of schools. I mean, all these hybrid homeschools, all these co-ops, all these a la carte providers. We have things that are, I call them bespoke tutoring centers because
Mm.
the folks in there are being paid as tutors. But if you went in there, you would think it was a little micro school. And so there's just an absolute explosion in options, and parents are driving every bit of it.
Educators are driving a little bit of
Yeah.
this, maybe more than a little bit. And one of my favorite things to read that you produce are these stories of former public school educators who have decided to leave the benefits and the security of the public school system and go and launch schools, launch co-ops, create these options. When you're going out and talking to these folks, do they tell you specifically why they left the public system, or are they all just focused on what's next and what they've created?
I almost always ask them about
Okay.
that. I want to get their origin story and their motivations. And so they do talk about that. And many of them are frustrated, for whatever reasons. And everybody's got a different story, but most of them were frustrated with what they were doing in public schools. And this is not to, be beaten up on public schools or anything like that, because, plenty of educators are happy in public schools. But for whatever, and just like plenty of parents are, but if for whatever reason you want something different, choice opens the door for that. And hundreds of thousands, if not millions of parents at this point have exited to find something that's a better fit for their kids. And in the same vein, we have easily hundreds of former public school teachers who have left the system
Wow.
and created their own schools. And I say parents are driving it because, if a teacher creates something and it's not of value to families, they're not going to survive, right? But so many of these former public school educators are so good at what they do, and they have such a compelling vision that most of them do create these options that are thriving and growing and have wait lists. I mean, demand is usually not a problem for so many of these educators who create these amazing options all over the place.
Ron, I'd love to hear some examples if any come to mind.
I mean, I could definitely throw some out, but let me say this first. I mean, part of the problem with capturing like what's happening in Florida and trying to help people understand it is it's so diverse. And so if I throw out a few examples, they're not necessarily representative because I don't know what is representative. There is so much. Parents do want different things.
I think I read something that you wrote that there are 30 rural counties. So 30 out of the 67 counties in Florida are considered rural. That's totally foreign to me from growing up in Orlando. So yeah, very, very, it's a huge state and a very diverse state.
It is a very diverse state, and I don't think people realize, even people who live here, just how much of it is still rural. We were using the Department of Health's definition of what's rural, which is 100 people or less per square mile, and there are 30 counties in Florida that meet that definition. And it's funny you bring it up because I think people have these really searing images of Florida in their head when they think of Florida. So they'll think of Miami, or they'll think of Orlando and Disney, or they'll think of the beaches, and they don't realize that, well, in between all of that, there are just vast stretches of heartland, you know? I mean, there's sugarcane country and cattle and citrus country and timber country, and in Panhandle, there's a lot of commercial fishing, and there are amazing schools, choice schools throughout all of that. And so, you know, I didn't get to answer your question because I was rambling so much about educators creating their own options, but you can find them anywhere, including in those rural areas. And you see lots of them. And in fact, I would say some of the most interesting, innovative, resourceful, out of the box options you will find anywhere, you can find in rural Florida.
Ron, I think I remember reading a story that you wrote several years ago about teachers who had experience working with students with special needs, and then they had specifically set up a school. Would that be another example to share?
You do see some pretty incredible schools that are emerging to serve students with special needs. Some of them started by those former public school teachers. I know one in Pinellas County in the Tampa Bay area was started by a former ESE Teacher of the Year. So, you know, she was really good
Mhm.
at what she did, but she's another one of those who was frustrated by what she saw in the traditional public school system, particularly with teacher training for teachers of students with special needs, thought she could do better creating her own school. So she and another former public school teacher created something down there called Autism Inspired Academy.
Okay.
I guess this was probably 5 or 6 years ago. Like all these other stories, they started off with a handful of kids. It grew and grew and grew. About a year ago, they moved to a different location because they had such a growing population of students. I mean, it's a hit, and she's much happier. You know, the families she's serving are much happier. Again, that's not, I don't mean that as a knock on traditional schools and what they're doing and, you know, all the families that they're serving so well. But for whatever reasons, there are teachers and families who want something different. And, you know, thank goodness we live in a state where we have that.
You also recently wrote a story about, I think this was more of a co-op than a school, but these were former educators who started a Christian co-op. So when you're talking to these educators, sometimes are they driven by the desire to have a faith-based option, to create a faith-based option?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that's another motivating factor for many families and educators as well. And that particular group I think you're referring to is up in Baker County, which is a rural county a little bit west of Jacksonville. So three former educators created this Baker County Christian co-op. And I think it was about 10 years ago. And they, again, started off small. I think they started off with 40 something kids. And now they have 300 with 600 on a waiting list. I mean, you know, Baker County's
In
not,
Baker County.
yeah, which maybe has 4,000 kids in its school systems.
People outside the public sector might not be aware of just how generous some of the benefits are when it comes to healthcare, but specifically pensions and retirement. Those of us who operate in the nonprofit world can't conceive of this concept of a pension or being part of a government retirement system. But I just want to point out that these former public educators, assuming that they're starting these schools before reaching retirement age, they're really making a financial sacrifice. Did they ever mention that to you?
Yeah, I mean, some of them, you know, it's funny. Like, I think as a whole, the teachers who are leaving to create their own schools, either they have been in the system for 25, 30
Okay,
years and
so they're
they,
good.
you know, they've got their pensions, you know, racked up, or they are under 10 years in, so they really haven't had that much vested, you know, for retirement. But you find others who are in that mid-range too, between 10 and 25 years. It is something they talk about. It is something that's still a challenge. I mean, you know, there are lots of things that still have to be worked through as this whole system evolves, being driven by choice. And one of
Mhm,
that is benefits. I mean, I
mhm.
think in many places, you know, the pay might be as good, but it's without the benefits.
Yeah.
And so I think lots of people are trying to figure out how we solve that challenge. It says a lot about the system and it says a lot about them that they would be willing to leave
Yeah.
and, you know, try something new even without that, even without those benefits.
You recently featured a ranch school. I think it was up in
Yes,
the Panhandle.
it's a little school called the Wagyu Mama Ranch Schoolhouse, and it is like a half mile from the Alabama line. This couple started a ranch there a few years ago. Um, kind of stumbled into doing a hybrid homeschool. I mean, they were, a little frustrated themselves with the local schools up there, and they began to see homeschoolers all around them who were doing really dynamic things. And they thought, maybe this is what we want to do. And so, mostly to help their own kids initially, they started a little hybrid homeschool operation, kind of a co op in their barn with 7 kids. And this was like a year ago, 18 months ago, maybe. And you fast forward to today, and they have more than 100 kids at 2 different locations,
Wow.
families coming from all over, including some military families who absolutely love what they're doing at this school. And it's not just, playing around on the ranch all day. They do all kinds of things that are ranch related, like they ear tag the cows and they dehorn the cows and
Mm.
they do pregnancy tests on the cows. I don't know how exactly you do that, but all kinds of things like that. But then they do have a group of experienced teachers who do all their core academics in there as well.
Wow.
A lot of it's because they're on a ranch, it's outdoors based. The kids really love that. They get to move around. They're not cooped up in a classroom.
Yeah.
When they are inside, it's in the barn. They've converted this barn into a one-room schoolhouse. And
Amazing.
I think it's another example of the kind of things that are possible because we have choice. They do standardized testing, believe it or not, because some of the families wanted that extra gauge to make sure that this, vision of learning that seems so fun is not only fun, but, delivering results. And
Your story mentioned that they're using the NWEA MAP assessment, which is the same assessment that my daughters took in the Lutheran bricks and mortar, very
oh,
traditional private school they attended for a number of years. And it's a 3 times a year assessment that provides parents and teachers with growth information and a lot of data that is very useful.
I find people who don't know this all the time, even in Florida, where we've had choice now for 25
Decades.
years. But it is required by the state that these kids take a norm reference test, like the NWEA MAP test or some other state approved norm reference test. And so some places, they're many places I think are doing this testing because they see it having value.
Yep.
And that's certainly the case with this schoolhouse on our ranch. But I just wanted people to know that it is a requirement as well. I mean, that is one of the things that people who created these programs thought would be an important piece. And I think, even though there's a lot of mixed feelings about standardized testing, it has been useful for these programs to have results. Whenever somebody wants to do away with the programs, like now, since we have another lawsuit, you know, um, it's always been useful to be able to point to the results and say, well, why would you want to get rid of something that's getting better results at less cost with
Mhm.
much higher parental satisfaction? Or when people want to come along and say, well, these programs aren't regulated enough, we need to put more regulations on them. I mean, we can point to those results and say, well, why would you want to do that? Why would you want to hamstring something that's getting better results at less cost? So I know there's mixed feelings about standardized testing, and I understand that. But I mean, maybe it's ironic, but that testing has allowed us to, you know, promote those programs and grow them.
These are norm reference tests, and there's a wide variety schools can choose from. So
Yes,
there is flexibility within that. This is not restrictive. This is not making you become a public school if
that's
you're
right.
offering this assessment. You said that Florida has more than 150,000 a la carte students and 7,000 a la carte providers. What are you referring to in that?
So these would be students whose parents get some state funding or state support to completely customize their kids' educations by picking and choosing from this growing menu of providers completely outside of full-time schools. So
Okay.
really it encompasses two programs. So it is the pet kids because that ESA is for kids outside of full-time schools, but it's also the UA homeschool kids
Okay.
because there's about 150,000 of those unique abilities scholarship students. Probably about half of them are using that scholarship simply for private school tuition, but the other half are home education students, and they are doing a la carte learning. So when you put those two pieces together, the PEP kids and the UA homeschool kids,
Okay.
there's about 150,000 now of a la carte students.
And 7,000 à la carte providers. So who are they?
So those are providers completely outside of full-time schools.
Okay.
I think the biggest categories would be categories that used to be or still are, public school adjacent. So tutors are a big group, therapists are a big group. Um, but there's also a ton of these new providers that are out of the box that are springing up all over the place. So, like that ranch school would be
Mhm.
one example because it's a hybrid homeschool, but it's not an official state registered private school. They're getting paid kind of on an a la carte basis. And they also offer some classes a la carte where if you don't want to go to the ranch school 2 or 3, 4 days a week, you might be able, you might want to just go on Friday and do the ranch activities, or you might want to just go and do their entrepreneurship class, or they have cooking classes and things like that. And Jenny, there are just all kinds of like
Wow.
really neat providers springing up all over the place. Again, many of them started by former public school teachers who may want to focus on just one niche thing as opposed to doing a whole school and a whole package of the school.
Right.
They want to focus maybe on just science. I mean, so there's some amazing like science providers out there that just do customized science lessons. And then I mean, there's all kinds of things. It's hard to describe like just what a diversity of options are just within that a la carte umbrella, but
Did you
it's brilliant.
feature carpentry? Was that one option recently, that you covered?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's several of those. There's probably more than I realize, but one of them I got to write about recently in Jacksonville is called the Sloyd School. And so Sloyd is some Scandinavian approach to education that focuses on woodworking with hand tools. So it is like a wood shop, but it's way more than a wood shop because they incorporate all kinds of lessons, life lessons into these kids building things.
Wow.
And this was started by a young couple. The husband is a mechanical engineer, and then the wife is a literature teacher at a hybrid homeschool. They started this like 3 years ago because the husband really likes working with wood and teaching kids how to build things. Started off with 21 kids, and now they have 91 kids. And these families who are either pet families or UA homeschool families, they sign up to take the woodworking class and they work that into whatever other providers they're picking and choosing from.
I think in those statistics that I mentioned, you also said that there was 1 billion in à la carte spending. This is monitored, and these are registered providers, right?
Yeah, they're registered providers with us. I mean, and we know where the money is going. I mean, you just can't spend money that's in your ESA account on willy-nilly things. I mean, there are certain categories of state approved eligible expenditures. You can only use the money for that. So
Okay.
yeah, people aren't wildly spending money on all kinds of crazy things, even though sometimes that narrative pops up too.
Well, Ron, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up the growth in Catholic school enrollment in Florida. It is a surprising statistic given the decline in Catholic school enrollment in virtually every other part of the
Yeah.
country.
Well, so Catholic schools in Florida are growing again, and like you said, that is so unlike what's happening in most of the rest of the country. Catholic schools have always had this unique place, I think, in American education, and they have been providing low cost, high quality education for generation after generation, often serving working class and immigrant families. I am so grateful for them, and to see that they've been declining for 50 or 60 years is a national tragedy. But in Florida, they're growing again because we have choice. And so for 5 years in a row, Catholic schools in Florida have seen enrollment growth. Enrollment is up, I think it's 12% over the past 10 years in Florida, whereas nationally it's down still probably another 12%. I have hope that that's going to change in other places because there are more choice programs. Now we have the federal choice program coming along. And I think what you see in Florida is that when you give parents the ability to access what they want, they do want things like Catholic schools and other faith based schools. And so I have a feeling, I don't want to jinx anything, but I have a feeling that we're going to see Catholic schools begin to grow in some other states with robust school choice programs too.
Were there signs that that might be happening in Indiana? Was that
Yeah,
a new
yeah.
development?
So the past year, Indiana had a big jump in Catholic school enrollment, and that was enough to put them in the positive column over the
Really?
past 10 years. So they were another one of the big states with a lot of Catholic school students that was now in the positive column along with Florida. So, I mean, look for other states to do that too, right?
Ron, I hear you saying throughout our conversation that Florida is very diverse and these options are diverse, and what educators want when they're starting them, what parents are seeking when they're researching them, also very diverse. But are there some major themes that you can kind of wrap us up with that you're hearing from parents when you're interviewing them, when you're talking to them, when you're visiting these places, that they're communicating to you as far as what it is that they're seeking or why they're seeking these options?
That's a great question. I mean, I think there are some things that all families have in common that they want. And you see that in so many different polls that ask families, well, why do you want options? And, they want safe schools, they don't want schools with tension and drama and bullying. They want good core academics, I think that's almost a universal thing, they want their kids to learn how to read and do math and learn science and social studies and civics. I think most families want some kind of character education component, whether that
Mm.
is, grounded in their faith or some other approach. So I think, most families want those things in common, but then after that, I think there's a million different things that they might want slightly different, right? I mean, some families want, basically like your old school, and they don't want a bunch of bells and whistles. They don't want anything exotic. But then there's other families who might want something more, I don't want to call it out there, but more different than the norm has been. So they may want a forest school or they may want a Montessori school. There are growing numbers of families who want classical schools. So
Mhm.
it's a great question. I think parents, want some of the same basic things. But then that's where our diversity and, where pluralism should come into play, right? I mean, if people want something slightly different, why can't they have it? If they want something a lot different, why can't they have it? I mean, um, I would think that, an education system that was based on pluralism would accommodate them. And I think this country is moving towards that, and I'm so grateful for that. And Florida has been in the lead of that, and I can't believe I'm here to like watch it unfold.
Absolutely. The teachers' unions in Florida would totally disagree with those parents that they deserve that wide array of options. They've sued. And here we are again with a lawsuit against the Florida school choice options. We'll see what happens. I'm wondering though, in the teacher union rhetoric, in the anti-choice rhetoric in Florida, if there's a pervasive myth that you hear regularly and that you'd want to tackle today.
Oh my gosh. I mean, there are so many. I mean, I think what's interesting about that group in particular, and the narrative they've been spinning forever, um, and you know it because you were here. I mean, for 25 or 30 years, we've been hearing the sky's going to fall. Like they just don't, hold back and trying to like portray choice as bringing on the apocalypse, right? I mean, they have said forever that school choice is going to ruin everything. And instead, the exact opposite has happened. I mean, this might sound kind of canned, but I don't see the apocalypse happening. I see the Renaissance happening. It's the
Mm.
exact opposite of what they've been saying, and it's unfolding right in front of our eyes. There is so much joy from all these families and all these educators who are now able to access something different. And again, sometimes it's modestly different, sometimes it's dramatically different, but now they have the freedom to have what they want. And I don't I don't understand how these folks still have credibility, frankly, after 25 or 30 years of saying everything's gonna fall apart when everything's gotten better.
Mhm.
So, that's one thing I would like to, like, set the record straight on. I mean, in every possible way, public education in Florida has gotten better. So many people did the right thing and moved the ball down the field to move us towards, a system where parents actually have power, to determine the best education for their kids. We've, you know, given we've restored their power to have that kind of say, which they should have, and to drive quality with their decisions.
It's been a real joy watching you delight in the stories of educators and families as they have benefited from this new era of educational freedom and all of these exciting options. How can other people follow your work and learn about these stories?
Well, so, we have a great blog. It's called Next Steps. So they can go to nextstepsblog.org and see all kinds of content. They can see, the stuff I write. They can also see great content from my colleagues, who write some amazing stories as well, that help people get a true picture of what actually is happening as opposed to what these crazy narratives might suggest. So they can go there to the blog and check it out.
That sounds great. Well, Ron Matus, thank you for your commitment to education freedom, to expanding and rejoicing in education options for families in Florida. And thank you for joining Freedom to Learn.
Well, Jenny, thanks so much for having me. I'm so grateful. And thank you for everything you do and for you elevating these stories and chipping away at the crazy narratives too. So thank you for everything.
Freedom to Learn is a production of the Defense of Freedom Institute. Learn more about our work at dfipolicy.org. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Send feedback, questions, and episode ideas to podcast@dfipolicy.org. And if you enjoyed today's conversation, please follow and review Freedom to Learn on your favorite podcast app and share it with a friend.